Hi all. In this activity, we will see how to connect this MVC framework with the database to save some data. So here, this is the same activity we use for the activity 3 as well. So in this activity 3, what we did actually, we implemented this HTML form once the user submitted the data to the server side. So we use Spring framework to display those data again back to the user. But in the activity 4, so we are going to save this data to the database. So when you are going to save this data to the database, Spring framework is having different approaches. So we can use different strategies to save this data to the database. So one is JDBC template. So that is the basic JDBC approach. So we can use this JDBC template class to save data to the database. So other approach is Hibernate. We can use Hibernate module to save data to the database. So we will see how to save data by using both these approaches, but in this video we will see how to use this JDBC template to save this data to the database. So in that case, first we need to create the Maven project, but I already created the Maven project for this application in the previous activity, that means activity 3. So I'm having that activity now. So I'm going to use the same activity to complete this as well. So let's run this activity and see whether it's working correctly. Yes, it's displaying the data like this. But now in this one, so we need to save this data to the database. So first I will create a database. So I have given the SQL command to create a table here. So therefore first I am going to create the database in my MySQL server. So first I will create a database here. So we will name it as activity 4. Then inside this one, so I am going to run this query. Okay, now I created the database. So you can see the structure of database. So this not the database and also the table. Okay, so I'm having the activity 4, the database as activity 4, and in that database, so I have created the table called user. So let's move to the Eclipse again. So now I have created the database. So now I'm going to add this information to the database. So when I'm going to add this data to the database, I told you that I'm going to use the JDBC template. So if you don't know about this JDBC template, and if you like to know more about this JDBC template, so then you can go to the Google and you can type JDBC template. Okay, once you type, you can see the JDBC template. The documentation is available under this Spring website. So you can go there and you can see what are the information available under this JDBC template class. Okay, so it's describing all the information, how you can create, how you need to create, and everything. So here you can see when you are going to create a JDBC template, so we need to have a data source. Here you can see the second constructor. So when you are going to create a JDBC template, we need to have a data source. First we will see what we need to create a data source here. So when you are going to create a data source, okay, so we need to give some information. So that means we need to give we need to give the username, password, those information when you are going to create this data source. So you know that normally in JDBC environment we need to give what is the URL, what is the URL, what is the username, password. So those information we need to give. So let's see how we are going to create this one. So before creating this one, so first I need to add the dependencies into my environment. So here I need to add these dependencies. I already added those things to this coding samples file. So these are the dependencies I need to add: MySQL connector and Spring JDBC dependency. So these two I need to add other than the dependencies that I used in the previous activity. So I'm going to copy these two dependencies, and then I will move to this form.xml file, and after the previous ones, so I'm going to add these two dependencies. So I will format the code. Okay, now I can save it. Once I saved it, so then these dependencies will be downloaded to my environment. Okay, now next we are going to do some changes here. So first thing is here we are going to use this database connection as a service in this Spring application. So therefore, under this services class, services packages, I'm going to create a class called user DAO. So you can give any name, but here I'm using user data access object. So all the database connection, or all the database communications that I need to do with the database relevant to the users, I'm going to use this user DAO. So therefore I'm going to add a class here. Under this package I'm going to add a new class, and I will name this class as user DAO. Okay, so then in this class, so this is the class, or this is actually a service class. So this service class I'm going to use to connect with the database. So in this video I told you that I'm going to use JDBC template to connect my application to the database. So therefore first I need to create a JDBC template property here. So I'm going to use JDBC template class. Okay, you can see it's coming from Spring Framework. So I'm going to add this class JDBC template, and I will create a property called template. Okay, so then I need to have a setter method here, because I need to set this template. I need to set this template. So therefore I will add a setter method here. So you can go to source and you can go to this generate setters, and from here I need to add a setter method. So I will select this option and I will generate it. Okay, now I can set this template. So now we will see how we are going to create this one. So this is service class. So that means we are going to use this class to connect our application to the database. But here sometimes you may remember that when we were implementing the same application by using this normal MVC approach, so we created this database connection out from our main application. So that means we use this JSP use bean tag, and we created this object, this database object, and after that we injected that object where we need to use it. So in here also, in the Spring also, we are going to use this bean object. We are going to create bean object first, and then we will use this bean object, this user.do bean object in any place that we need to connect with the database. So that is what we are going to do here as well. So the same thing we did when you are doing the normal MVC approach as well. So we created a bean object by using JSP use bean tag, and then we added this bean object to this session, and then we use this bean object. So that means we injected this bean object when we need to connect our application to the database. So here also we are going to create a bean object by using this Spring framework, and then we are going to inject this bean object when we need to connect our application to the database. So let's see how we are going to create this bean object. So now I'm going to the configuration file. So here under web.inf, so I'm having the front controller servlet. So this is the configuration file we built previously, and under this one, so we already created one bean object, but now we are going to create few more bean objects. So I already added this code to this file. From this file you can see that, so this is the bean object that we need to create to create. So this is the bean object which is actually associated with this user.do class. So here you can see I am actually using com.myapp.services.user.do class to create this bean object. The name of the bean object is DAO. So in this DAO class, so this is the user.do class. So in this class, so we are having a property called template. So to use this class, we need to set a value to this template. So therefore I'm going to set a value. So how I'm going to set a value? So I'm going to create another bean object. So here you can see I'm going to refer another bean object called JT. So this is the JT bean object. JT means so this is the name of this bean object. So this is for Java. This is for JDBC template. Okay. So when I'm creating this bean object, I'm going to use the class Spring framework class called JDBC template. And there, so you saw that when you are going to create a JDBC template, we need to pass a data source there. Okay. So then in this JDBC template, we had a constructor which actually asking for a data source. So then we need to set a data source there. So when I'm going to set a data source, I'm going to refer another bean object. That the name of that bean object is DS. So now we will see what is this DS means. So this is the bean object which named as the DS. So DS object is actually using the Spring framework data source driver manager data source. So this class is going to use to create this DS or the data source object. So when you are using this class, so then you need to provide these informations. So these informations to this class to create this data source. So what are these information? First thing is we need to provide the driver class name. What is the driver that we are going to use? You know that when you are going to connect with the JDBC, we are going to use this com.mysql.jdbc.driver. So that is the driver we are normally using. And the other one is we need to provide what is the URL of your data source. So here in my case, the activity, so we will go to the database. So here you can see activity 4. So that is the activity 4. So that is my database URL. And then the username and password. So these are the information that we need to pass to this driver manager data source class. So that is actually Spring Framework class. We are not going to build this class. This is already available with the Spring Framework. So we are going to provide, or we are going to set these properties to create this, to create a data source by using this driver manager data source class. Then that data source or the DS object will be a resource for this JDBC template object, because when we are creating a JDBC template, we need to pass a data source. So now we created a data source as a bean object, and we name this bean object as DS. So now here when I'm creating the JDBC template bean object, I'm going to use this data source. So you can see I'm referring this DS bean object, and then I can create this JT object or the JDBC template bean object. So then I'm going to set this JDBC template object to this template property which I already added to this user DAO class. So that is what I am going to do with these things. So here I'm going to create 3 bean objects. Okay. So I will go to my front controller servlet, and I'm going to add these things here now. So now I first need to create a bean object for this user DAO class. So then in any place if I need to use if I need to connect with the database, I'm going to use this DAO bean object. I'm going to connect with the database, but when I'm creating this DAO object, I need to set a value to this template property. So therefore I'm going to create another bean object by using this JDBC template class. So the name of that one is JT. When I'm creating that object, so I need to add a data source, because this JDBC template class requires a data source to create this connection. So then I'm going to create another bean object called DS by using driver manager, and then from that I'm going to create a data source. Okay, so the name of that bean object is DS. So this template is going to refer this DS object. So that is what I'm going to do here. So now I will check this information com.mysql.jdbc.driver. So that is correct, and URL is this one, and username is root, password is empty. Okay, so now this configuration, so I added these configurations. So now I will move the code again. So now we will go to the controller side. So now in this case, so we are going to save this data to the database. So this is how we are going to do it. First, inside this controller, so we need to have a property with user DAO property. So user DAO object. So I'm going to create it. So we'll name it as DAO. So I need to import this class here. Okay, then I'm going to use this user DAO property to save this one. So before that, I need to implement how I'm going to save it. Okay, so therefore I'm going to implement a method here, public, and I'm going to use the return type as boolean. So because here I'm going to save this data to the database. So then I'm going to return whether my whether I saved this data successfully or not. Okay, so that is what I'm going to return. So therefore I'm using the return value as boolean here, and then we will use the name, method name as save, and here I need to pass which user I need to save. Okay, so here we are creating a user object, so I can directly pass this user object to this method, so then I can save this user. Okay, so therefore I will create a user object here, then I can get this user object from the controller side, and then I can save this user. So it's giving some error because it requires to return something. So I will put return true for now. After that we will modify this one. So now I'm going to save this user. So when I'm going to save this user, first I need to have a SQL command. So I will write this SQL command first. So I'm going to insert data now. So I'm going to use the insert query, insert into user. So what are the values I'm going to insert? First name, last name, username and password. So these are the values I'm going to insert. So I will use the normal SQL here without using prepared statement, but if you need, you can use the prepared statement as well with this JDBC template. So now I'm going to add this data. So I will use this user object, and I'm going to get the first name here, and then I will copy these things to the other places as well. So I need to remove these escape characters. So these were added by the Eclipse. Okay, now first name, and here we need to get the last name, and in this place we need to get the username, and here we need to get the password. Okay, now I created the SQL. So now I'm going to use this template. So I'm going to use this template, and then I'm going to run this query. Okay, so here we are having something called update. So here you can see this is the update method, and you can see the return type of this update method is the number of rows affected, and we can run a normal SQL query to update the database by using this update method. So I'm going to use that method here, update SQL, like this. So here, but you know that the return value will be a int here, int. So we will create it at int a, so that will be the number of rows affected. But here we are going to return a boolean value, so that means whether we saved this data successfully or not. So that is what we are going to send from this method side. So that means we need to have a if condition here. If this a is greater than 0, so that means we actually saved this data to the database. So without so then I can modify this return value like this: a is greater than 0. If a is greater than 0 means we actually modified the database, or we saved this data to the database. But without using this variable here, I can directly add this coding part here. So then also it will work. And then so the meaning of this one is it will execute this part, and then this part will return an int value, and then it will compare whether this int value is greater than 0. If it is 0, if it is greater than 0, then it will pass the value true. If not, it will pass the value false. So that is what we are doing with this part. So I will format this code now. Okay. Now I need to call to this method from my controller to save this data to the database. So we will use this DAO object, and we will call to this save method, and we will pass the user object. But here we are having one problem. So you can see that we are having a property here. Okay, but we don't have any value to this property. So if you are going to run this code, so then it will give some errors because we cannot continue without having a value to this DAO object. Okay, so then in that case, so we discussed about this dependency injections. So that is the design pattern. So that is what we are actually using in this Spring framework. So we can inject. So this is a dependency now, because this this method is actually depending on this DAO object here. You can see. So we are going to save by using this object. If we don't have an object, so then we cannot do this part. Okay, so that means we need to have an object here. But here we are not going to create object. So we are not going to use user DAO equal new user DAO. Likewise, we are not going to create, because if you create like this, so then it will be highly coupled with this user DAO one. So that is why we created this as a bean object here. So now we are having this as a bean object here. So in this Spring framework, we can inject this bean object into this place. So how we are going to do it? So we are having a special annotation. What is that? We can use @AutoWired. Okay. So by using this annotation, so then we can inject that already created bean object. So this is the bean object into this place. So then we can use this bean object and we can execute this part. Okay, so that is what we are actually doing with this in this place. So now we completed this part. So we are getting the user information, and we are forwarding this user object to this DAO class. So this is the user DAO class, and here we are having the save method. It's actually getting the user object, and after that we are using this user object to get first name, last name, username and password, and after that we are using the update method, and we are going to execute this query, and then after that we are going to pass whether we successfully executed. So that means the data actually we saved the data to the database or not. So that information we are actually passing to the controller side again. So now we will run this one, and we will see how it's going to work. Okay, we are having an error here. We will see what is the error. Unknown column. Okay, I am having a spelling mistake here. So we will go to the code and we will fix that issue. Okay, here you can see I type it in incorrect way. Okay, now we will run it again. Okay, we got this interface. So now we will go to the database and we will see whether we are having this information. Yes, you can see we saved the information correctly. So after that, we are having one more thing to do here in this activity. So you can see once we saved this information successfully, so that means once the registration is successful, so then we need to show a message to the user the registration is successful. If not, we need to ask user to register again. Okay, so that is what we need to display. So let's see how we are going to implement that part. So in this case, so I'm going to use this boolean value. So this method, so that means once I call to this save method, it will actually return a boolean value whether I saved this data or not. So I'm going to use this boolean value to create this requirement, to cater this requirement. So here I will add a if condition like this. If this is true, so if this method is passing a true value, so then I'm going to first I'm going to create a model called M here. So I'm going to use this Spring framework. We are having a class called model. So you can see from the Spring framework.ui package, we are having a class called model. I'm going to use this model class and I'm going to create a model object called M, and then I'm going to add an attribute there by mentioning I'm going to add an attribute there called message or MSG to save what message that I need to display to the user. Okay, so here I'm creating this model object that is M. So then I'm going to use this M object and I'm going to add an attribute. Okay, I'm going to add an attribute to this model object, and here I can give a name for this attribute. I will give the name as MSG, and then I can add a value. So here I am adding a value registration successful. Okay, registration successful. So likewise I'm going to add a message here. So if not, if I'm getting a false value from the method side, so then I'm going to change this message. So then my message will be error occurred, please try again. So that is what I'm going to display if I'm getting any error from the from the database side. Okay, and now I'm going to pass this display view to the front controller again with this model data. Okay, with this model actually. Okay, so then I can use this model again from the view side to display this message. So now we will see how we are going to do it. Okay, so now when I'm sending this view, it will send the model as well. So I'm actually sending the view and the model to the controller side. Now the controller is going to find this correct view. So here I'm telling I need to use this display view. It will find this correct view and it's going to bind this model data into that view. So then I can use this model data from my view. So then we will see how we are going to do it. So I'm going to open this display.jsp file. Now we are not going to display these informations. We are just going to display a message to the user. So I will change this as user registration. So here now I am going to display the message. How I am going to display the message? So I can display it like this. So it's an attribute in my model. It's a message is an attribute. MSG is the attribute that I saved the message, so I can use it like this. So then it will display the message. So which message we are going to display, so that is actually we are going to decide from the controller side. If we can save it successfully, so then we are going to display registration successful message. If not, we are going to display error occurred, please try again. So let's see how this is actually going to work. So now I'm going to run this project again. So I will use a different username here because the username is a unique field. Okay, you can see we are getting the message, registration successful. Now we will go to the database and see. Okay, you can see we added this data as well. So now we will see what will happen if we are adding, if we are getting any error from the database side. I'm using the same username here. Okay. Okay, so this is passing a SQL error here, so I think we need to handle that one. So I thought I can demonstrate it by using that option, but I can't because it's actually passing a SQL error here. So not SQL error, so therefore we cannot test it like that. However, so you can see that if you are adding some correct information, so then we are actually getting a message. So here if I am adding the correct information, so then we are getting the message registration successful. And if you go to the database, you can see that we already added this data to the database. So that is what we need to do in this activity. So here we use this JDBC template to save data to the database. In another video we will see how we are going to use this Hibernate framework to save this data. So that's it for this one. Thank you.